Hi everyone, before we begin, a quick announcement. As you should always in assembly, put your phones away, be present here. And your teachers have been made aware that this assembly will likely go over time by about 10 minutes, so you can just settle in, not be antsy about the time. We're all here together. It's hard to believe that almost 1 year ago to the day when the events of 10/27 unfolded. I remember it vividly. I had just walked out of the JCC in Squirrel Hill after my workout when I headed across the street to the bank. And that's when I started to hear sirens, so many sirens. And unlike all the other days when the sirens then pass, they just kept coming. A person walked into the bank, moving with purpose where I was. She was dressed in an EMT uniform. As she was conducting her bank business next to me, she received a call and quickly exited the building. I knew then that something was wrong. When I left the bank, I did what all of us would do. I checked my phone. I'm not sure how many of you know of the app Nextdoor, but it was here that for the first time I saw that there was an active shooter in the Tree of Life building, a half a mile from where I was standing. I raced home to my family where we turned on the TV and started to watch the news coverage, actively trying to shield our then 6- and 4-year-old from knowing what was going on. I remember the days and weeks to follow of being here at school and going through my daily life while my Squirrel Hill community was turned upside down. For days, I drove home with a new route to avoid the intersection that had been blocked off. I saw national media in my neighborhood, and people from all over the world were reaching out. Everyone now knew Squirrel Hill, but it wasn't for the reasons I would have hoped. And then things went back to normal. Or did they? For me, this event marked a true change, as in, they will never go back to the way things were. And that's both a good thing and a bad thing. There are the obvious bad things of seeing armed police throughout any event that is a Jewish event, including prayer services or simply a speaker. There's the obvious downside of every moment when I, the eternal optimist, have to face the fact that really bad things, true hatred of others, is real and a part of my city. It's hard to make sense of this event, and particularly this event within the broader context of all the brokenness we see today in our country and in the broader world. It's overwhelming at times. One of the many good things to come out of this event for me is that it has pushed me to think about my own engagement with others in a more deliberate way. I want to show up more in all different ways, whether sitting with the student, engaging civically with my community, or just taking the time to check in on friends and stay connected with people. This type of engagement is what drove me to attend an event on Yom Kippur just a few weeks ago. On the holiest day of the year for Jews, a day centered around repentance and forgiveness, these themes were addressed in the context of mass shootings. Moderated by Reverend Tim Smith, a pastor and community activist in Hazelwood, along with hundreds of others, including my fellow SSA friends, Mrs. Lau and Ms. Logston, we heard directly from Dan Leisure, a man who was shot on that day at Tree of Life and survived, and also from Ivy Shamus, a social studies teacher and survivor of the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Mr. Leisure opened the conversation by asking, how do you find a middle ground between kindness and justice? That's the challenge of life, he said. Ms. Shamus recounted the horrific scene the day a shooter entered her school building. She was teaching a senior elective on the Holocaust and ironically was leading a discussion about hate speech and hate acts on college campuses when a gunman shot into her classroom, killing 2 of her students and injuring 4 more. There were several profound takeaways from listening to them speak, but I want to share 2 that will likely stay with me forever, and I hope you too will think about them. Ms. Shamus shared that in those most horrific moments of trying to determine what she would do to try to protect herself and her students, all she could think to do was yell to the gunman, "I love you." She thought, how could somebody kill someone that loves them? Tragically, 2 students from her class were killed that day. The very last words they heard were, "I love you." The other was something that Mr. Leisure shared, which was a quote I've continued to think about. Pain should not be wasted. We will all, in a few moments, remember each person who lost their lives on that day. As their families grieved, there are two different families who have taken steps to remember, repair with others in a specifically designed way. Cecil and David Rosenthal were two brothers who lost their lives on that day. In their honor, their family has developed a movement towards random acts of kindness in the community with the hashtag #LoveLikeTheBoys. Surprise someone with baked goods, offer to assist an elderly neighbor, give a generous tip to waitstaff, call an old friend, write a handwritten note, offer compliments. The love that Ms. Shamus showed, the love that the Rosenthal boys exhibited in everything they did, is something we can spread here at SSA and beyond. Pain should not be wasted. To me, this rings true with the Feinberg family's movement called Two for Seder. The idea here is that Jews should invite two non-Jews to their Passover Seder. Taking this more broadly, the idea is that when we learn others' customs, practices, stories in order to better understand the world around us. One lovely member of this class of 2020 has shared with me that she has what she calls friend goals. She identifies people around her who aren't close friends of hers, and she works towards the goal of getting to know them. This is exactly the kind of work we can all do to not waste the pain in events like this. It is my hope that as we spend this day together remembering, that we can work together to honor these victims' lives by hearing each other's stories, by learning about each other, and by spreading random acts of kindness throughout our school. We've worked on this assembly in this week's programming with a committee of students and teachers, several of whom have agreed to share their personal stories with you. I am both grateful for and proud of them, as it takes great courage to do something like this, to be vulnerable in front of so many people for the sake of helping others learn their story. And to everyone who has agreed to be a part of this assembly, they are honoring the memory of Joyce Feinberg and the other victims by sharing their stories, and I know you will join me in sharing my deep respect for your peers who will be up here speaking and playing today. Thanks.
I remember the moment we found out vividly. We were out to dinner for my brother and sister's birthday, and my boyfriend at the time had tagged along because he was basically a part of the family. I knew what had happened that morning, but the reality hadn't set in yet. I had a headache, so I went out to the car to get some Advil, unaware that those few moments I was outside would change my life forever. When I walked back to the table, I saw my mother hugging my boyfriend. His back was to me, but I could tell he was crying. His grandparents, she mouthed. I went numb. We drove him home, and I walked inside just in time to hear his father on the phone say both of my parents were murdered today. Things didn't feel real. The following week was the hardest week of my life. Watching someone lose a family member is hard enough, but the added pressure from the fact that it was due to something so extreme was what truly stood out. Between the legal interviews, the media coverage, and the funeral preparations, which included police escorts and protection, those who lost loved ones couldn't catch a break. Just watching it was exhausting. For me, the worst part was putting on a brave face every day I went to school. Almost everybody seemed unaffected, and at times, it felt as though people just didn't care. A week later, and all talks to the shooting and the lives lost were a thing of the past. There were other things to worry about. I learned quickly that in today's world, even at Shady side, these events were not cause for much concern. Essays and lab reports were still due, homework still had to be done, and class still started at 8:15. A year later, the pain is still paralyzing, the time insignificant. School got harder, and the world became scarier. The harsh reality is that these situations, these tragedies, are our country's new normal. And while steps are being taken, I'm afraid that it's not going to change anytime soon. It is hard not to feel powerless, and for most of this past year, that is exactly what I have been fighting. I have since realized, though, that this issue is more than just policy. For true reform, we must work to grow and understand each other as a community. We must learn to tolerate and embrace each other's differences. We must call out these tragedies for what they are: hate crimes, terrorism, and absolutely unacceptable. Most importantly, though, we must keep in mind that this is not what defines us, not as a community, not as a city, and not as a country. We have a chance to better the world around us, a chance to make events like these truly a thing of the past. However, this will not happen unless we continue the conversation around topics like this. If we keep pretending that momentary thoughts and prayers are enough, we will keep experiencing these tragedies, and massive groups of people will suffer as a result. Going forward, I beg you all to try and see these situations as a product of identifiable and fixable problems, rather than inevitable events. Together, we can fix this. Together, we can repair the world.
Every day, as I drive past Tree of Life on my way to school, I am reminded of the reality of the events of October 27th. Tree of Life Synagogue is at the heart of my community and has been central in so many parts of my life. For years, I have attended many of my friends' bar and bat mitzvah services there, and throughout middle school, I attended weekly services to ensure that the necessary 10 people required to conduct a service were present. On the morning of October 27th, I woke up to blaring sirens, and within seconds of looking at my phone, the shocking and devastating reality of what had happened began to seep in. I turned on the TV and watched for hours, unable to process what had happened just a few blocks away. Not only did this tragedy hit so close to home because my community was directly targeted, but even more so, it targeted my faith and religion. Suddenly, we could no longer feel safe in our houses of worship. In the wake of the many other attacks on the Jewish community that unfolded throughout the year, I'm still experiencing the same feelings I had just a year ago. I am saddened by the recurrence of hate speech and how little our society has learned from similar events of the past. The one glimmer of hope comes from witnessing Pittsburgh's response as a whole, especially from the Muslim and Christian communities at vigils, community gatherings, and even sporting events. The outpouring of support throughout the year has truly reminded me that love, especially in Pittsburgh, will always outweigh hatred and intolerance. The theme of Tikkun Olam, repairing the world, which was displayed throughout this week, truly reflects the importance and power of Pittsburgh's response to this attack. In the wake of such a tragedy, rather than focusing on hatred, we should instead be proactive and focus on bettering ourselves and making our community more welcoming to people of all religions, cultures, and backgrounds. When communities from different faiths and backgrounds find ways to see beyond their differences and instead work together, the possibilities are limitless. As we approach the anniversary of the shooting, the area surrounding the synagogue appears more hopeful, as though our community is emerging from the darkness. The tarp-covered fence surrounding the scene of the tragedy has recently been replaced with colorful artwork from across the world, conveying messages of love, strength, and support. We are reminded that the shooter may have taken 11 members of our community, but he did not and could not shatter our beliefs or our spirit.
Joyce Feinberg was a research specialist in the University of Pittsburgh's Learning Research and Development Center prior to her 2008 retirement. Predeceased by her husband, Stephen, she is survived by her sons, Anthony and Howard, and her grandchildren. May her memory be a blessing.
The right one.
Rose Mallinger was a devoted member of the congregation at Tree of Life. Some news outlets initially reported erroneously that Mallinger was a Holocaust survivor, but she was a native of Squirrel Hill, though she was a young woman during the time of the Holocaust. She is survived by her daughter, Andrea Wedner, who was among those wounded in the attack at Tree of Life, and her son, Alan. May her memory be a blessing.
Richard Gottfried owned a dental practice along with his wife, Margaret Peg Durachka. He offered his dental services to those in need, working with low-income residents, refugees, and immigrants at free, low-cost dental clinics. He was president of the New Life congregation, which met at the Tree of Life synagogue. May his memory be a blessing. Jerry Rabinowitz was a family physician who was beloved by his patients. One of his patients, Jan Grice, called him the sort of doctor who sent you on your way feeling better in all respects. Amid the chaos of the shooting, Rabinowitz rushed to help other victims and being hailed as a hero. May his memory be a blessing.
Cecil Rosenthal, 59, was known as the honorary mayor of Squirrel Hill, a well-loved presence in his community. His brother, David Rosenthal, 54, also killed in the shooting, was remembered by neighbors as a quiet, gentle spirit with a fascination for law enforcement. The brothers were residents at a local group home overseen by a chiva. They were comforting fixtures at my Tree of Life synagogue and in my Squirrel Hill community, living life happily and unencumbered by societal norms. May their memory be a blessing.
Bernice Simon, 84, was a former nurse who was known in her community for doing charitable work. Her husband, Sylvan Simon, 86, was a Vietnam War veteran and an accountant prior to his retirement. The two got married in 1956 at the Tree of Life synagogue, the very same synagogue where they spent their last moments together. The neighbors noted that the couple would always hold hands as they walked through their neighborhood. May their memory be a blessing.
Daniel Stein, 71, was a leader at the New Light congregation. Fellow congregant Barton Schachter said of Stein, "You call on him for a tough task, and he'll do it without looking for any kind of pat on the back or plaque or anything." He had recently become a grandfather. May his memory be a blessing.
Melvin Wax, 88, was an accountant prior to his retirement, as well as a father and grandfather. An active member of the Jewish Community Center, he was leading Shabbat services at Tree of Life when the shooting began. May his memory be a blessing.
Irving Younger, 69, was a regular at Tree of Life services and an enthusiastic volunteer, greeting visitors to the synagogue and helping them get settled. He ran a Pittsburgh real estate company and coached youth football and baseball. May his memory be a blessing.
October 27th, 2018 is a day that will forever be etched into my brain. It started out as a normal day. I was with my friend, and we were going to walk up the street to eat at Pamela's. We ended up deciding to stay in because we started to hear sirens every few minutes. At first, we disregarded it because we live in the city and sirens are common. The sirens continued, and I looked up what was going on so close to my house. But I didn't realize how close it was until I looked outside and saw a SWAT van parked in my driveway. I remember getting a call from my mom telling me to lock all of the doors and stay inside because there was an active shooter on my street. I turned on the news and was told the same information. I still had no clue what the depths of this event were. My mom got home and she said to me, "Alexandra, you need to be strong for me right now." I had no clue why she said that until I turned the news back on and then saw attack on the Tree of Life synagogue. My heart stopped and I was speechless. I know anti-Semitism is real and I have experienced it firsthand, but I never could have imagined that something like this would happen. I remember feeling sick and my heart aching in pain while listening to the first few names released of people who had been shot. I knew all of them. I never thought I would have to deal with such violent hate in my lifetime. I was so scared that it was hard for me to imagine moving forward or ever feeling normal again. A year later, and it is still hard for me to feel normal when I think about that day. But something that does help me feel a little bit better is knowing all of the progress we have made as a community since the tragedy. Pittsburgh and so many other places opened their arms to the Jewish community in so many ways, and I cannot be more appreciative. Although we have made a lot of empowering progress, I think that we could be more active in speaking out and fighting hate speech and anti-Semitism, because I am tired of feeling unsafe in not only my synagogue, but also my neighborhood. And I'm sure other people feel the same way. On a more positive note, I think the tragedy helped bond Pittsburgh and integrate communities and spread love, support, and strength to all. I now understand why my mom told me to be strong, not only because it was going to be a hard time, but because strength is what keeps us going. Strength and love are what will power through anything. I hope that the love this has brought never dies, because the more loving and accepting we are, the more progress we will make to be stronger than hate.
I distinctly remember where I was when the Tree of Life massacre on October 27, 2018 occurred. I was at school taking the ACT that morning, unaware of the horror unfolding minutes from my home. As I exited the exam room, a teacher shared with me the little information that was available at the time. In a matter of minutes, one man had attempted to destroy the love and acceptance largely embraced within the Pittsburgh community. She gave me a hug and later that day reached out again. After she left, I checked my phone to see countless messages from friends and family, reaching out to see if I was okay. A genuine desire to ensure our well-being was extended from communities I am a part of, Jewish and non-Jewish alike. The following evening, I attended a vigil at Soldiers and Sailors. There, I listened to an outpouring of support from individuals of various cultural communities. Imams, priests, rabbis, and community leaders from different backgrounds across the world devoted not only monetary, but also emotional support to Pittsburgh's recovery. Stronger Than Hate signs appeared in the windows of stores throughout our city, and individuals from across the nation wrote letters to the families of victims. Regardless of any differences, individuals came together to bolster one another in this troubling time. Soon after, I had the opportunity to attend a dinner with parents of victims of the Parkland massacre in Florida and the families of victims of the Tree of Life shooting. I sat with the father of a boy who was killed in the halls of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and I listened to him speak passionately of his decision to establish an initiative creating safer schools. All of the individuals who had been so closely impacted by these events made the decision to speak out against the hate that they suffered in their hometowns. That weekend, not only apparent was the great strength and healing that arises when individuals of all backgrounds support each other, but also the powerful impact that is possible when people unite to make a change. When faced with adversity, we are given the choice to sit idly while atrocities continue to occur, or react and fight against what we believe is wrong. True strength is evidenced in transforming a tragedy into an opportunity to make a positive impact on our world, just as the survivors of these massacres have done. 1 year ago today, a horrible act of violence occurred in Pittsburgh, in our very own Mr. Rogers neighborhood. In one form or another, this tragedy impacts us all. Mr. Rogers recounted the words his mother would say when he saw tragedy on the news as a young boy. "Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping." These words have been offered up in the past when tragedy has occurred. Now, these words apply to us. Almost a year ago today, an unspeakable horror occurred in our city. A tragedy unimaginable to occur in such a loving and welcoming community as Squirrel Hill. With Mr. Rogers' words in mind, we must be the helpers. Although an atrocity such as this is not requisite for each of us to take a stand, since it did occur, it is our duty to unite together to speak out against hate crimes and make a change in our society. Thank you.
I wanted to play music by the Beatles today, and the reason I wanted to do that is because the Beatles came to fame during a really messed up time in the world, while a lot of people were supporting hatred, violence, and war. The Beatles were praising peace, love, understanding, and having compassion for one another. And those messages are just as, if not more important today than they ever were. I'm not much of a singer, so just bear with me. I read the news today, oh boy, about a lucky man who made the grade. And though the news was rather sad, well, I just had to laugh. I saw the photograph. He blew his mind out in a car. He didn't notice that the lights had changed. A crowd of people stood and stared. They'd seen his face before. Nobody was really sure if he was from a House of Lords. I saw a film today, oh boy. The English army had just won the war. A crowd of people turned away, but I just had to look, having read the book. I love to turn you on. And the broken-hearted people living in the world agree there will be an answer, let it be. And though they may be parted, there is still a chance that they will see. There will be an answer, let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. Whisper words of wisdom, let it be. And when the night is cloudy, there is still a light that shines on me. Shine until tomorrow, let it be. I wake up to the sound of music. Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. Whisper words of wisdom, let it be. Let it be, just let it be, let it be, let it be. Yeah, there will be an answer, let it be.
I want to conclude this morning with a brief passage from the book Night, written by Holocaust survivor and Nobel Prize winner Elie Wiesel. There's a long road of suffering ahead, but don't lose courage. We shall all see the day of liberation. Have faith in life. Above all else, have faith. Drive out despair, and you will keep death away from yourselves. Hell is not for eternity. And now a prayer, or rather, a piece of advice. Let there be comradeship among you. We are all brothers and sisters, and we are all suffering the same fate. The same smoke floats over all our heads. Help one another. It is the only way to survive. Thank you all. You're dismissed. Please leave in silence.